Hey, hey, hey. Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone. How you doing? Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd. You know who it is. Just coming on here for a little bit of a rant and a talk to just have a meta discussion to talk about reviews, my reviewing style, why I review the way that I do, why certain things come up, why certain things don't. I've seen a lot of talk online, and also people have asked me personally in emails repeatedly, why don't I talk about music theory in my reviews? Why aren't I talking, I guess, more deeply about even some of the baseline stuff that comes up in music theory? What key is the song in? What kind of chords or scales are we using? Time signatures outside of maybe an occasion where, we're talking about an odd time or something like that. I will admit and I will say that generally music theory does not really come up all that much in my reviews. I am someone who has a baseline understanding of music theory, being a musician myself and someone who has taken music lessons for a long time. I'm nowhere on the level of like an Adam Neely or anything like that, believe me. If you really want to nerd out over some music theory, I mean, please do watch Adam Neely's videos. If you're unfamiliar with him, he's a deeply and wonderfully talented guy, total sweetheart as well. But still, Adam Neely, if you really want to nerd out over some music theory, definitely watch some of his videos. So I'm nowhere near on that level or understanding. Obviously, there are courses. Obviously, there is a wealth of information on the internet that I could be seeking out as well. But in my experience, talking with other music fans and sort of getting into music myself through that process of kind of communally sharing in the music experience over artists and groups that I just have mutual shared interests in with people who I sort of just knew in my immediate area. Uh, Music theory would rarely even come up. Also, with other people who I knew who were, in fact, musicians. And I think that's mostly because most people, and again, even musicians, when listening to music and when enjoying music, I think they're appreciating it more on an emotional level than they are a music theory level. I mean, certainly there's not a whole lot of music theory that I think goes into some of the artists that I review and that I listen to, like there's not a whole wealth of music theory going on like a new little Pump single or anything like that. If you were to notate such a thing, I can't imagine it would really look like much outside of some of the rhythmic patterns. If it is kind of a very busy trap beat, looking kind of intense. But still, having said that, can't really imagine that diving into the music theory behind a little Pump song would be that intriguing. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe somebody out there will do such a YouTube video and it will become a total hit. And of course, there are records out there and there are songs and albums that I review that do have some really intricate theoretical elements to them, and those are certainly worth discussing. But even those, I think I'm enjoying not because there's some kind of interesting music theory angle to those tracks, but more for the function that those theoretical angles serve. What is the function of the music theory going into the track? Because obviously there have to be some kind of theoretical elements if you're going by traditional music standards to most things that you're listening to. And certainly sort of going outside of those norms, getting into things like microtonal tuning, like on that Juke Geit record or that frickin' King Gizzard record, can certainly throw kind of a left hook into an album that I didn't anticipate. Certainly things like that can be interesting, can make an album unique, but at the end of the day, what is the emotional or aesthetic function that those theoretical elements serve? I think that's really ultimately what matters the most to people, because you can really kind of work as much music theory into your works as you would like, throwing in all of these unnecessary chords, getting really insane with how you sort of build out or structure your melodies and that sort of thing. Do crazy time signature switches all around the place. I mean, I'm sure that's really just the tip of the iceberg in terms of what kind of music theory experiments you could be kind of diving into in your musical compositions and everything. But still, at the end of the day, if it just kind of sounds like pure wankery, it's not really going to appeal to many people. So at the end of the day, really, I just kind of see my reviews as a service of communication. I'm trying to relay an idea in my head to you about whether or not I see a certain album that I'm reviewing as appealing. And usually for a lot of people, that doesn't boil down to the theoretical elements of the track. Look at it as like a car, for example. When people get into a car, or when most people want to read a car review for a car that they might be interested in, sure, there are a few things about the inner mechanics, super baseline stuff about like what's the horsepower, or what's this or what's that people might want to read into, but you're not going to read a car review, or at least a mainstream car review, or a car review that is trying to appeal to the widest amount of people, that goes into every single little detail about the inner workings of the engine and so on and so forth. Most people, when they read a car review, they want to know, hey, how does the car drive? Like, what's the 0 to 60? What's the dashboard like? What are all the bells and whistles? Like, what are the trim upgrades? And so on and so forth. Mostly the immediately recognizable qualities that add to the positive or negative experience that one has with that car. Now, of course, there are always going to be cars or pieces of artwork that are bigger, more conceptual, require a bit more diving or explaining, and when those opportunities arise, I think reviewers and the music community at large should step up to the occasion of observing that stuff. But are you going to find me in a position where I am diving into the inner workings of the music theory behind like Migos Culture 2? No, I would rather just take a nap. So that's basically my mindset and my philosophy when it comes to incorporating or just not incorporating a lot of music theory into my reviews, is understanding it and communicating it and diving into it absolutely necessary when it comes to relaying to an audience of readers or listeners or viewers whether or not an album is appealing or what the highlights or lowlights of a particular popular music album are. No, not really. And maybe there are a lot of you out there who totally disagree with me, who fancy themselves as maybe classical reviewers or classical connoisseurs or jazz musicians or jazz connoisseurs or reviewers and so on and so forth. But sometimes if you're listening and your appreciation or the reviews that you do center around a certain sound or a certain genre, you may get particularly nuanced or specific in your detail when discussing those albums or those genres, because nobody is sort of diving into those records or diving into those sounds as consistently as you may be. Just as if you were to, I don't know, go and check out some electronic music reviews on Resident Advisor or something like that. You might catch some reviews or articles or discussions of some of the gear that went into a certain record, which is something that I never really particularly bring up because that's not really something that I feel like I should be covering, not only because I'm not that well versed when it comes to gear or analog synthesis. I mean, shout out to Andrew Huang, but also because I think your average music listener isn't really diving into a song that they like, wondering like what synth or what kind of this or what kind of that went into a song. I mean, as a bassist myself, I often wonder what kind of bass was the bass player playing on this track? What kind of strings did they use? What kind of this? What kind of that? But that's not really something that I dive all that deeply into because I know a majority of people that watch my stuff don't play bass. What is the function of that record? What styles and sounds and genres are we familiar with that the artist is playing with? What themes are they singing or rapping about or whatever? What kind of samples are they using? What kind of emotions are they going for? Like, what are they trying to create? What are they actually creating? And what are the results of that, essentially? And if we need to talk about some of the things they use and do theoretically or instrumentally to create those results, then we will discuss them. But discussing every single little thing that goes into creating that final product, it's not 100% necessary when it comes to music appreciation. One can definitely appreciate a piece of art without necessarily understanding what goes into making that piece of art. I mean, I, for one, don't really know much when it comes to painting or illustration or making movies, but there are lots of paintings and illustrations and films that I enjoy quite a bit. I, in fact, love, or maybe some of my favorite pieces of art of all time. But again, if you asked me to shoot a short film or paint a picture, I really wouldn't know where to start, or anything that I came up with on the fly would just be pure garbage, I promise you, because I don't really know anything about that shit. And on top of it, if I were to read a review about a movie, I would most likely get lost or bored in any sort of block of paragraphs you handed me that started going into what cameras were used, what was the editing process, and what kind of film school theories were applied during this scene and the other scene. That stuff, frankly, just kind of goes right over my head and doesn't really add to my experience with enjoying the movie, which again might seem kind of like a basic way of looking at things, but I know and understand that I don't know everything. I'm never going to know everything. So I think I'm going to leave it at that. Hopefully I've explained myself properly here and given you an accurate idea as to why I don't really get all that theoretical in my reviews, and why I don't see diving into music theory all that deeply as an essential part of sort of getting an effective music review out into the public. Again, I would also like to stress that this is just personally my own music reviewing theory. Like music theory, you can kind of bend the rules of review theory all you would like and sort of formulate your own reviewing styles based off of what I've said or anything else that you would like personally. This is just kind of my own personal way of going about review it, and what I think works and what doesn't work for what I want to try to communicate in a review. And I'm going to leave it at that. Over here next to my head is another video that you can check out. Hit that up, or the link to subscribe to the channel. Anthony Fantano, Music Theory, forever.